Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Discovery watching the stars bend and twist as they dropped out of faster-than-light travel near Proxima Centauri. The year was 2387 and humanity had finally cracked the secret of traveling between stars after decades of trying and failing and trying again. Jake had been chosen to lead this first mission beyond their solar system because he was calm under pressure and good at making quick decisions when things went wrong. The Discovery was not the biggest ship humans had ever built, but it was the most advanced, with new engines that could fold space and time and sensors that could detect things millions of miles away. Jake had served in Earth's Space Navy for 20 years and had seen humanity grow from a single planet species to masters of their own solar system, but this was different because today they might meet someone else out there in the vast darkness. "Between stars, Captain, we have contact," said Lieutenant Amy Price from her position at the sensor station. Her voice was steady, but Jake could hear the excitement underneath because they all knew this moment would change everything for humanity. "Unknown vessel bearing 27 Mark IV distance approximately 50,000 kilometers," Jake moved to look over her shoulder at the displays showing a ship unlike anything in human databases. It was long and curved like a blade with what looked like solar panels or energy collectors running along its sides. The ship was bigger than the Discovery, but seemed to move with grace rather than the harsh mechanical movements of human vessels. "Any response to our standard greeting signals?" Jake asked, knowing that humanity had prepared dozens of mathematical and musical patterns designed to show peaceful intentions to any aliens they might encounter. The scientists back on Earth had spent years debating what would be the best way to say hello to another species. "Negative, sir, but they are scanning us with some kind of beam," Amy reported while her fingers danced over the controls trying to learn more about their mysterious visitors. "The energy signature is unlike anything we have ever seen before, Ambassador." Lisa Carter entered the bridge at that moment, having been called from her quarters where she had been reviewing first contact protocols for the 100th time. She was humanity's best diplomat and had negotiated treaties between the Earth government and the various colony worlds, but this was her biggest challenge yet because the future of her entire species might depend on the next few hours. "Any signs of hostile intent?" she asked Jake while moving to stand beside his command chair. Lisa had worked with Jake before during the colony disputes and trusted his judgment when things got complicated. She wore the dark blue uniform of the diplomatic corps with the Earth symbol prominently displayed on her chest. "None that we can detect, but their technology is clearly more advanced than ours," Jake replied honestly because there was no point in pretending otherwise. The alien ship had appeared without warning, and their sensors had not detected its approach, which meant their stealth capabilities were far beyond human understanding. Suddenly the main screen flickered and an image appeared showing the bridge of the alien vessel. The being looking back at them was humanoid, but clearly not human, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. When it spoke, the words came through perfectly translated into English, which meant their technology was even more impressive than anyone had imagined. "Greetings, travelers from the third planet of this system," the alien said in a voice that sounded both musical and mechanical at the same time. "I am Kethmore of the Zilari trading fleet. We have been monitoring your progress and are curious about your species." Lisa stepped forward and activated the communication system to respond. "I am Ambassador Lisa Carter, representing the United Earth government. We come in peace, seeking knowledge and friendship with other species among the stars." Kethmore tilted his head in what might have been curiosity or amusement. "Your species is young, but you have achieved faster than light travel much sooner than most. This is unusual and interesting to us." Before Lisa could respond, alarms began sounding on both ships as some kind of energy surge rippled through space between them. Chief Engineer Ryan Blake called out from the station that their main power coupling was overloading and would fail within minutes. On the alien ship, Kethmore seemed to be receiving similar reports from his crew. "Our vessels are caught in a quantum resonance cascade," Kethmore explained with what sounded like worry in his translated voice. "If we cannot break free, both ships will be destroyed." Jake watched his crew work frantically to solve the problem, using every procedure in their manuals, but nothing seemed to work. The Zelari ship appeared to be having the same difficulties, with their crew moving around their bridge in obvious panic. It looked like first contact might also be last contact for both species. Ryan Blake suddenly stood up from his engineering station with excitement on his face. "Captain, I have an idea, but it is completely against regulations and might destroy us faster." "Tell me," Jake said, because desperate times called for desperate measures, and watching 2 ships full of intelligent beings die was not acceptable. When there might be another option, no matter how crazy it sounded. If we reverse the polarity on our main deflector and fire it directly at their ship while they do the same to us, we might be able to cancel out the resonance cascade. Ryan explained quickly while his hands moved over the controls. Preparing for the attempt, Jake looked at Lisa, who nodded her agreement, then opened communication with the alien ship. "Kethmore, we have a possible solution, but it requires both ships to work together and trust each other completely." The alien looked surprised, then thoughtful before responding. "Your species continues to surprise us." "Very well, we will attempt this together." Both ships fired their deflector beams at exactly the same moment, and space around them flashed with brilliant light. When it faded, both vessels were safe, and the dangerous energy cascade had dissipated completely. Kethmore appeared on screen again with what definitely looked like amazement on his alien features. "Remarkable," he said slowly. "Most species would have accepted destruction rather than risk such an untested solution. Your people think in ways that intrigue us greatly." Lisa smiled with relief and satisfaction. "Perhaps we could meet in person to discuss our species further." "Indeed," Kethmore replied. "I believe the Galactic Council would be very interested in meeting humanity." 3 weeks later, the used Discovery arrived at Nexus Prime and Ambassador. Lisa Carter could hardly believe what she was seeing through the main view screen. The orbital city stretched for hundreds of kilometers in every direction, with towers and domes and structures that defied human understanding of architecture and engineering. Ships of every conceivable design moved between the massive space stations, while beings from across the galaxy conducted business and diplomacy. Dr. Helen Brooks stood beside Lisa, watching the incredible sight with the trained eye of a linguist who had spent her entire career studying human languages and communication patterns. She had been chosen for this mission because of her ability to understand not just words, but the deeper meanings behind how different cultures express themselves, and now she would face the ultimate test of those skills. Colonel Steve Parker represented Earth's military interests and had been quiet during the journey to Nexus Prime while studying everything they had learned about galactic politics and power structures. He was not here to fight, but to understand what threats and opportunities existed among the stars for humanity and how Earth might need to defend itself in this larger universe. The shuttle ride down to the main diplomatic complex gave them time to review their presentation one final time, though. Lisa knew they had practiced it so many times that everyone could recite it perfectly. The challenge would not be remembering their words, but adapting to whatever unexpected questions or challenges the Galactic Council might present. Kethmore met them at the landing platform and guided them through corridors filled with beings that looked like they had stepped out of humanity's wildest dreams and nightmares. There were creatures that looked like living crystals and others that seemed to be made of pure energy, while some appeared almost human except for extra arms or strange colored skin. The Grand Assembly contains representatives from 847 different species, Kethmore explained as they walked toward the massive doors that led to the council chambers. Some have been members for thousands of years, while others joined only recently, but all have proven their commitment to peaceful coexistence. The doors opened to reveal a chamber so vast that Lisa could not see the far walls, and rising up in concentric circles were thousands of seats occupied by beings from every corner of the galaxy. At the center of it all stood an ancient creature that must have been one of the Vorthic that Kethmore had described as the oldest and wisest species in the Council. Elder Vorthic Zentulu spoke in a voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once, and somehow Lisa understood every word, despite knowing it was being translated by technology far beyond human comprehension. Welcome, beings of Earth, to the Grand Assembly of the Galactic Council, where we gather to promote peace, understanding, and cooperation among all sentient species. Lisa stepped forward and began the presentation she had rehearsed so many times. Honored representatives, we come before you as humanity seeks to join this great community of species. We bring our desire for peace, our commitment to learning, and our unique perspectives, shaped by our journey from a single world to the stars. The presentation went smoothly as Lisa described human history and achievements, while Helen provided cultural context and Steve answered questions about Earth's defensive capabilities and military philosophy. Many council members seemed impressed by humanity's rapid technological development and their unified planetary government, but not everyone was convinced, and the questions became more challenging as the session continued. A graceful aquatic being. That must have been one of the Keither raised concerns about human aggressive tendencies and their history of warfare. Your species has engaged in constant conflict throughout your recorded history, the being said in a voice like flowing water. How can we trust that you will embrace peaceful coexistence when violence seems to be your natural state? Helen stepped forward to answer because this was exactly the kind of cultural challenge she had prepared for during years of study. Honored Representative, our conflicts have indeed shaped us, but they have also taught us the value of cooperation and the terrible cost of division. Every war in our history has ultimately led to greater unity and understanding among our people. She continued, explaining how humanity's greatest achievements had come not from individual brilliance, but from diverse groups, working together toward common goals. Our species learned long ago that our differences make us stronger when we choose cooperation over conflict and understanding over fear. A proud warrior from the Draconis Confederation spoke next with interest in his voice. Your tactical flexibility in the recent crisis with our Zalari friends was impressive, but we wonder if your people can truly commit to peaceful solutions when they face serious challenges. Steve answered this question by describing how Earth's military forces had evolved from instruments of conquest to protectors of peace, and how human strategy now focused on deterrence and defense rather than aggression. We have learned that the strongest defense comes from having allies who trust you, and enemies who respect your commitment to protecting what matters most. The questions continued for hours as council members probed every aspect of human society and culture, looking for weaknesses or signs that humanity might disrupt the careful balance that had maintained galactic peace for centuries. Some were clearly skeptical, while others seemed genuinely curious about these newcomers, who had developed so quickly. Finally, Elder Zentulu called for the formal evaluation to begin, and Lisa felt her heart racing as she realized that the next few minutes would determine humanity's place in the galaxy. The Vorthic explained that most species required centuries to meet the criteria for council membership, but humanity's rapid development and unified government had accelerated their application. The council must determine whether your species possesses the technological advancement, cultural stability, and commitment to peaceful coexistence required for membership, the ancient being intoned. We have heard your words and studied your actions, but now we must decide whether humanity is ready to join our community. The debate that followed was conducted in languages Lisa could not identify even with the translation system, but she could see the passion and concern on the faces of beings from across the galaxy as they discussed humanity's fate. Some gestured emphatically, while others sat in quiet contemplation, and a few seemed to be arguing among themselves. When the discussion finally ended, Elder Zentulu announced the council's decision. By majority vote, this assembly grants humanity provisional membership in the Galactic Council with a probationary period of 50 standard galactic years, during which your species will demonstrate its commitment to our shared values. Lisa felt relief and joy flooding through her as she accepted the terms on behalf of all humanity, but she also noticed the restrictions that came with provisional status, including limits on human expansion and military development. Still, it was a beginning, and humanity had taken its first step toward becoming a true galactic civilization. As they left the great chamber, Kethmore walked beside them with what might have been pride in his expression. Your species has impressed Many today, but remember that words are easy and actions reveal true character. The galaxy will be watching to see what humanity does with this opportunity. Lisa nodded, understanding the weight of responsibility that now rested on her shoulders, and on every human being who would follow in her footsteps among the stars. 6 months had passed since humanity joined the Galactic Council, and Ambassador Lisa Carter was settling into her new office on Nexus Prime when the first disturbing reports began arriving through the Galactic Communication Network. 3 colony worlds belonging to peaceful species had gone completely silent with their regular status updates, simply stopping without explanation or warning. Intelligence Officer Amanda Ross had been assigned to work with the Council's Security Division, and she spent her days analyzing data streams and communication patterns, looking for threats that might endanger the fragile peace that held the galaxy together. She was good at her job because she had learned to spot patterns that others missed, and right now the patterns she was seeing made her very worried about what was happening in the outer rim territories. The missing colonies were all located near the galactic edge, where Council influence was weakest and where ancient trade routes connected civilized space to the unknown regions beyond. Amanda had requested permission to investigate, but the Council moved slowly when it came to military matters because most member species had not faced real threats for generations. Commander Nick Turner received orders to take the UES vigilant on what was officially described as a routine patrol mission to check on the silent colonies, but everyone knew this was really a reconnaissance mission to find out what had happened to thousands of innocent beings. The Vigilant was one of Earth's newest ships designed for long-range operations with advanced sensors and a crew trained for dangerous situations. Dar. Casey Newman joined the mission as the team's xenobiologist because her expertise in alien life forms might be crucial if they encountered new species or unknown biological threats. She had studied every known form of life in the galaxy and had theories about what kinds of beings might exist beyond the edges of civilized space, but nothing had prepared her for what they would actually find. The joint crew included representatives from several council species, including Draconis warriors who brought their combat experience in Zalari, technicians who understood systems that human engineers were still learning about. Working together had become easier over the months, but this mission would test their cooperation under real pressure for the first time when the Vigilant arrived at Kepler 442b. The first thing Nick noticed was the complete absence of communication. Signals from what should have been a thriving agricultural colony with over 50,000 inhabitants. Long-range sensors showed that the settlements were still intact, but there were no life signs and no responses to their attempts at contact. The landing party that Nick led to the surface found a scene that would haunt them for years to come. The colony buildings were undamaged, but everywhere they looked there were signs of a struggle that had ended in complete defeat for the defenders. Equipment was missing, and there were strange energy burns on walls and vehicles that did not match any known Council technology. Cassie discovered the first clues about what had happened when she analyzed residue left behind by the attackers. The energy signatures were unlike anything in Council databases, but they showed a level of technological sophistication that exceeded most known species. Whoever had done this possessed weapons specifically designed to incapacitate rather than kill, which suggested they wanted prisoners rather than corpses in the colony's administrative center. Amanda found partial records that painted a terrifying picture of the attack. The raiders had struck without warning, using some kind of jamming technology that prevented distress calls, and then systematically rounded up the entire population in less than 6 hours. The efficiency was remarkable and suggested extensive planning and preparation. These are not random pirates or opportunistic raiders, Amanda told Nick as they reviewed the evidence. This operation required detailed intelligence about the colony layout, defenses, and population. Someone has been watching these worlds for a long time. The breakthrough came when Casey analyzed debris from what appeared to be damaged raider equipment and found technology that matched theoretical descriptions from ancient Council archives. 3 centuries ago, a militant empire called the Zarian Hegemony had rejected Council membership and disappeared beyond the galactic rim after declaring the Council weak and corrupt. Helen Brooks had studied those old records during her research. into galactic political history, and she confirmed Amanda's suspicions when they transmitted their findings back to Nexus Prime. The hegemony believed that superior species should dominate inferior ones through strength, and they viewed the Council's peaceful cooperation as a sign of weakness that would eventually destroy galactic civilization. Nick ordered the Vigilant to investigate the other missing colonies, hoping to find survivors or more evidence about hegemony capabilities, but each site told the same story of swift, overwhelming defeat followed by the complete removal of all inhabitants. The attackers were clearly working from a plan that had been developed over decades or centuries. At the third colony site, Casey made a discovery that changed everything when she found a partially destroyed hegemony data storage device that contained detailed biological and psychological profiles of every major council species. The hegemony had been studying their enemies for generations, learning their weaknesses and developing specific weapons and tactics to exploit them. They know exactly how to fight us, Casey explained to the assembled crew. Every species in the council has been analyzed and cataloged. They know our physical limitations, our cultural blind spots, and our technological dependencies. This is not just an invasion, it is a precisely planned campaign of conquest. The Vigilant was preparing to return to council space with their findings when long-range sensors detected a massive energy signature approaching from deeper in hegemony territory. Nick ordered battle stations as dozens of enemy ships dropped out of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation around the isolated council vessel. The hegemony ships were unlike anything in human or council databases, with angular black hulls covered in weapon emplacements and no visible viewports or communications arrays. They moved with mechanical precision that spoke of advanced automation and central coordination that made individual initiative impossible. Unknown vessel, you have entered hegemony territory without authorization, came a cold mechanical voice over the communication system. Surrender your vessel and crew for processing or be destroyed. Nick knew that surrender meant slavery or death for his crew, so he ordered evasive maneuvers while the Vigilant's weapons systems came online. The human ship was outnumbered 20-1, but Nick had advantages that the enemy could not have planned for because humanity was still too new to the galaxy for the hegemony to have detailed information about their capabilities. The battle that followed showcased the fundamental difference between human and hegemony military philosophy. The enemy ships relied on overwhelming firepower and coordinated attacks that assumed their opponents would follow predictable defensive patterns, but Nick used tactics that had been developed during humanity's chaotic military history. Instead of engaging the enemy directly, Nick ordered seemingly random course changes that confused the hegemony formation, while the Vigilant's weapons targeted specific systems rather than trying to destroy entire ships. The human crew worked together with an intuitive cooperation that the heavily automated enemy forces could not match. When one hegemony ship suffered damage to its coordination systems, it began firing on its own allies in apparent confusion, which gave the Vigilant the opening it needed to escape toward council space. As they fled, Nick watched sensors show the arrival of hundreds more enemy ships moving in perfect formations toward the heart of galactic civilization. The war that everyone had hoped would never come was about to begin, and humanity found itself carrying the warning that might save thousands of species from slavery or extinction. The galaxy was about to learn that peace without strength was just another word for surrender. Emergency sessions convened across Nexus Prime as news of the hegemony's return sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council, and representatives who had lived their entire lives in peace struggled to comprehend the scale of the threat approaching their worlds. Ambassador Lisa Carter found herself at the center of frantic discussions as council members demanded answers that no one possessed about an enemy that had been forgotten by most. Civilization's elder Zentulu called for order in the Grand Assembly, but his ancient voice carried worry for the first time since humanity had joined the council. The reports from the Outer Rim confirm our worst fears about the return of those who rejected our path of cooperation centuries ago. We must decide how to respond to this threat that endangers every peaceful species in the galaxy. General Patricia Wells arrived from Earth aboard the fastest ship in humanity's fleet, carrying comprehensive analysis of everything the Vigilant had discovered about hegemony capabilities and intentions. She was Earth's highest ranking military officer with 40 years of experience in strategic planning, and her presentation to the Council would determine whether galactic civilization survived or fell to those who worshipped strength above all else. Honored representatives, the enemy we face possesses overwhelming technological and numerical superiority over our combined forces. Patricia began as holographic displays showed the true scope of hegemony military power. Their fleet consists of over 10,000 heavily armed vessels, supported by manufacturing capabilities that can replace losses faster than we can inflict them. The mathematics of destruction were simple and terrifying because the Council's defensive strategies had been designed to deter minor conflicts, rather than survive total war against an empire that had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Most member species contributed little more than moral support to any potential military effort because they had forgotten how to fight after generations of PSTR. Kevin Murphy stood beside Patricia as she outlined the enemy's advantages, and he was ready to present humanity's assessment of how the Council might survive what appeared to be inevitable defeat. Kevin had studied military history and strategic theory throughout his career, and he understood that conventional thinking would lead to conventional destruction in this situation. The hegemony expects us to meet their fleets in direct confrontation, where their superior numbers and firepower will guarantee victory, Kevin explained to the assembled representatives. Traditional defensive strategies will result in the systematic destruction of every Council world within months of the war beginning. Murmurs of fear and desperation rippled through the great chamber as species that had never known war contemplated the end of their civilizations, but Kevin continued with the unconventional solution that might save them all. However, their greatest strength can become their greatest weakness. If we refuse to fight the war they expect and instead force them to adapt to tactics they have never encountered, the plan Kevin presented required unprecedented cooperation between species that had barely learned to work together during peacetime, and complete trust between former strangers, who would now depend on each other for survival. Human tactical flexibility would be combined with alien technologies and capabilities to create something entirely new in galactic warfare. Captain Rachel Stone had been chosen to lead the first integrated Council human task force because of her experience working with mixed crews and her reputation for creative problem-solving under pressure. She stood before the Council to explain how the experimental unit would operate using principles that challenged everything most species believed about military organization. Traditional command structures rely on rigid hierarchies and predetermined responses to enemy actions, Rachel explained. Our integrated units will use flexible leadership and adaptive tactics that allow individual initiative while maintaining overall coordination through shared objectives rather than detailed orders. The concept was radical because most alien military traditions emphasized either individual warrior prowess or collective discipline, but never the dynamic balance between personal creativity and group coordination that human forces had developed through centuries of chaotic warfare. Many Council members expressed doubt that such cooperation was possible between species with fundamentally different ways of thinking. Initial testing of the integrated units revealed both the potential and the challenges of the new approach, as human officers worked alongside Draconis warriors who valued honor above efficiency and Zelari technicians who preferred careful analysis over quick decisions. Cultural differences that seemed minor during peacetime became major obstacles when life and death decisions had to be made in seconds. The first skirmishes with hegemony scout forces proved that the concept could work when properly executed, as integrated units successfully destroyed enemy vessels that outnumbered them 3-1. The key was using each species' strengths to compensate for others' weaknesses while maintaining the unpredictability that human tactical doctrine brought to every engagement. But early victories could not hide the fundamental reality that the enemy was already moving against the Council's core worlds with a massive invasion fleet that contained more firepower than most species had ever imagined possible. Long-range sensors tracked hundreds of hegemony task forces advancing through space with mechanical precision toward targets that had been selected through centuries of careful intelligence. Gathering the debate in the council chambers grew more desperate as representatives argued about whether to attempt diplomatic solutions or prepare for the total war that seemed increasingly inevitable. The Vorthak still believed that negotiation might succeed where force would fail, but humanity's analysis of hegemony philosophy suggested that their enemies viewed any attempt at peaceful resolution as confirmation of council weakness. The hegemony does not want our surrender, they want our complete subjugation, Lisa Carter told the assembly. Their entire culture is built on the belief that superior beings have the right to dominate inferior ones, and they will not stop until every free species in the galaxy has been reduced to slavery or extinction, Amanda Ross presented intelligence. Reports that painted an even darker picture of hegemony intentions as intercepted communications revealed plans for the systematic enslavement of useful populations and the elimination of species deemed too dangerous or worthless to preserve. The enemy saw genocide not as a necessary evil, but as a tool for creating the perfect galactic order under their absolute control. Casey Newman's analysis of captured hegemony biotechnology showed weapons specifically designed to exploit the physiology and psychology of individual council species, which meant that surrender would not bring mercy but only more efficient methods of control and punishment. The enemy had turned the council's greatest achievement of peaceful diversity into a vulnerability that could be exploited with surgical precision as reports arrived of the first major worlds falling to hegemony assault forces the council faced. The harsh reality that their philosophy of peace through cooperation had left them vulnerable to those who embraced war as the ultimate expression of superiority. Ancient defense pacts proved meaningless when most signatory species lacked any meaningful military capability. Patricia Wells addressed the assembly one final time as explosions lit up the night sky above. Nexus Prime from the first enemy reconnaissance probes testing the capital's defenses. The war we hope to avoid has begun whether we are ready or not. Our only choice now is between fighting together using every advantage we possess or dying separately as our worlds burn one by one. The vote was closer than anyone had expected, but the Council authorized full military mobilization under integrated human-alien command structures that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. Species that had spent centuries avoiding conflict now prepared to fight for their survival against an enemy that knew no mercy and accepted no compromise. The galaxy was about to discover whether cooperation and innovation could overcome brute force and technological superiority in a war that would determine the fate of every free being among the stars. The hegemony advance seemed unstoppable as three major council worlds fell within the first week of their main offensive, and billions of beings found themselves under the brutal rule of conquerors who viewed mercy as weakness and cooperation as a disease to be cured through absolute obedience. Traditional council defensive strategies crumbled before enemy forces that had spent centuries preparing for this moment. Commander Eric Davis led a mixed-species special operations team deep behind enemy lines where they implemented guerrilla warfare tactics that had never been seen in galactic conflict before. His unit included Draconis infiltrator Kralvan, who brought warrior traditions adapted for stealth operations, and Zelari technician Wisp-9, whose understanding of advanced systems proved invaluable for sabotage missions that struck at the heart of hegemony logistics. The team also included Kithra defensive specialist Aquamel, whose people had developed personal shielding technology that could hide small groups from enemy sensors and allow them to operate in areas where conventional forces would be detected and destroyed within minutes. Working together, they represented everything the hegemony hated about council civilization, but their differences made them more effective than any purely human or purely alien unit could have been. Eric's first major operation targeted a hegemony supply depot that supported 3 separate invasion fleets, and the attack demonstrated human tactical thinking adapted for interstellar warfare. Instead of trying to destroy the facility with overwhelming force, his team infiltrated the base and reprogrammed its automated systems to deliver defective equipment and contaminated supplies to frontline units, The beauty of the sabotage was that it took weeks for hegemony commanders to realize what had happened because their rigid, hierarchical structure made it impossible for lower-ranking personnel to question orders or report problems without authorization from superiors who were often light years away. By the time they discovered the sabotage, dozens of enemy ships had suffered catastrophic failures during critical operations. Meanwhile, Dr. Michelle Clark worked with a team of human engineers and alien scientists to develop new weapon systems that exploited previously unknown weaknesses in hegemony technology and tactics. Her breakthrough came when she realized that the enemy's greatest strength was also their most dangerous vulnerability because their interconnected command systems allowed for coordination but also created opportunities for disruption. The project combined human understanding of computer systems with Zalari expertise in quantum mechanics and Draconis knowledge of energy manipulation to create weapons that could turn hegemony ships against their own fleets. The key was understanding that the enemy relied so heavily on automated coordination that individual ships had lost the ability to operate independently. When their central command systems failed, Michelle's team developed what they called Cascade viruses that could spread through hegemony networks and cause progressive system failures that looked like random mechanical problems rather than coordinated attacks. The viruses were designed to activate only when enemy ships were engaged in combat, which meant that hegemony forces would not realize they were under attack until it was too late to respond effectively. Admiral Frank Lewis coordinated the first major council counteroffensive using tactics that confused and disrupted enemy formations by refusing to engage in the kind of direct confrontations that hegemony commanders expected. Instead of trying to match the enemy's superior firepower, human-led forces used hit-and-run strategies that struck at vulnerable targets and then withdrew. Before enemy reinforcements could arrive, the psychological impact was as important as the physical damage because hegemony forces had been trained to expect predictable responses from their enemies, and the constantly changing tactics employed by integrated council units made it impossible for enemy commanders to develop effective countermeasures. Every engagement brought new surprises that challenged their assumptions about how warfare should be conducted. Eric's team achieved their greatest success when they infiltrated a hegemony command vessel and discovered the central coordination network that controlled their entire invasion fleet. The system was more sophisticated than anything human or council technology could match, but it was also completely dependent on the rigid hierarchical structure that defined hegemony society. Working with Michelle's Cascade virus technology, Eric's team planted multiple information warfare weapons throughout the enemy network while avoiding detection by security systems that had been designed to stop conventional attacks but had never encountered the kind of creative sabotage that human thinking made possible. The viruses were programmed to activate simultaneously across dozens of star systems. The coordinated attack began during the largest hegemony offensive of the war when over 1,000 enemy ships were advancing on the Council's most important industrial worlds. Admiral Lewis had positioned integrated forces throughout the target systems, using deployment patterns that appeared random to enemy analysts but were actually designed to take maximum advantage of the chaos that was about to follow. When the Cascade viruses activated, hegemony coordination systems began failing in ways that looked like random equipment malfunctions but were actually carefully orchestrated attacks on the enemy's ability to function as a unified force. Individual ships found themselves receiving contradictory orders while command vessels lost contact with their fleets and automated systems began treating friendly units as hostile targets. The psychological impact on hegemony personnel was devastating because their entire culture was built on the belief that superior technology and rigid discipline would always triumph over the chaotic improvisation that characterized inferior species. Watching their own ships fire on each other while their commanders screamed conflicting orders challenged everything they had been taught about the nature of warfare and civilization. Lewis coordinated council counterattacks that struck at exactly the moments when enemy confusion was greatest and integrated. Units used their flexibility and cooperation to exploit opportunities that conventional forces would never have recognized. Human tactical creativity combined with alien capabilities created combinations that the hegemony had never encountered and could not counter with their predetermined strategies. The turning point came when an entire hegemony sector fleet turned on itself during a major engagement as cascade viruses convinced individual ships that their fleet mates were council vessels in disguise. The spectacular self-destruction of over 200 enemy vessels was broadcast throughout galactic space and demonstrated that the seemingly invincible hegemony could be defeated by tactics they had never imagined. For the first time since the war began, Council forces achieved victories that could not be dismissed as minor setbacks or tactical delays, and hegemony commanders found themselves dealing with problems that their centuries of preparation had not anticipated. The rigid structure that had been their greatest strength became a liability when facing enemies who refused to follow predictable patterns. Integrated units pressed their advantages as enemy morale collapsed, and hegemony forces discovered that their technological superiority meant nothing when they could not trust their own equipment or coordinate their attacks effectively. Council worlds that had seemed doomed to conquest were liberated by forces that combined the best elements of dozens of species under human tactical leadership. The war was far from over, but the galaxy had learned that cooperation and innovation could overcome brute force and technological superiority. When guided by tactical thinking that valued creativity over conformity and adaptation over rigid doctrine, the hegemony had brought war to the Council, but they had also awakened something that would ultimately prove stronger than their dreams of galactic domination. The final collapse of the Zarian hegemony came not through total destruction, but through the complete breakdown of the rigid, hierarchical system that had defined their civilization for millennia. Deprived of their central coordination networks, and facing constant unpredictable attacks from integrated Council forces, many hegemony worlds simply surrendered rather than continue fighting a war they could no longer understand or control. Commander Eric Davis watched from the bridge of a liberated hegemony vessel as former slave worlds declared independence and began the long process of rebuilding societies that had been crushed under centuries of absolute rule. The irony was not lost on him that the empire, which had believed in the superiority of strength over cooperation, had been defeated by the very diversity and adaptability they had dismissed as weakness. Admiral Frank Lewis coordinated the massive humanitarian effort required to process millions of refugees and former slaves while simultaneously hunting down the remaining hegemony loyalist forces that had retreated to distant sectors beyond the galactic rim. The few remaining enemy fleets no longer posed a serious threat to Council space, but they could still cause tremendous suffering if allowed to prey on defenseless colonies. Michelle Clark found herself leading teams of human and alien scientists as they worked to understand and dismantle the sophisticated control systems that the hegemony had used to maintain their empire. Much of their technology could be adapted for peaceful purposes, but the weapons designed specifically for oppression and control had to be completely destroyed to prevent future tyrants from using them. The war's end brought unprecedented changes to galactic civilization, as the old purely peaceful approach to interstellar relations proved inadequate for a universe that still contained hostile forces willing to use violence to achieve their goals. Ambassador Lisa Carter now held the title of Secretary General of Interspecies Relations and worked to draft new accords that balanced cooperative ideals with realistic defense requirements. We have learned that peace without strength is merely an invitation for those who worship power to take what they want, Lisa addressed the expanded Council Assembly, which now included representatives from dozens of former hegemony worlds eager to embrace the cooperative principles they had been denied for centuries. True peace requires both the wisdom to seek understanding and the courage to defend what we value most. Colonel Tony Garcia established the Galactic Defense Initiative as an integrated military force that combined the tactical flexibility of human doctrine with the unique capabilities and technologies of every member species. The new organization represented a fundamental shift from the Council's previous reliance on moral authority to a realistic understanding that deterrence required credible defensive capabilities. The Defense Initiative training facilities became symbols of the new galactic order as young beings from hundreds of different species learned to work together using principles that emphasized cooperation and innovation over rigid hierarchy or individual superiority. Human tactical thinking formed the foundation for new strategic doctrines, but every species contributed their own perspectives and capabilities to create something greater than any single civilization could achieve. Alone Dr. Sandra Lee led the Xenological Research Consortium in efforts to understand and integrate the diverse technologies and cultures that had been brought together through conflict but now had the opportunity to contribute to peaceful development. Her teams worked to ensure that the lessons learned from war would strengthen rather than divide the galactic community. The most important discovery was that humanity's greatest contribution to galactic civilization was not their individual capabilities, but their talent for bringing out the best in others and creating unified efforts from diverse groups that might otherwise never cooperate. Human strategic thinking had provided the framework for victory, but it was the combined efforts of all species that made success possible. 5 years after the war's end, President Kate Johnson stood before the Council Assembly in chambers that had been relocated to Earth, which had become one of the major hub worlds for interspecies cooperation and technological development. Her speech reflected on the journey that had brought the galaxy from the edge of conquest to a new era of strength through unity. When humanity first entered this council, some believed that our history of conflict made us unsuitable for peaceful coexistence. Kate said, as representatives from nearly 1,000 species listened to words that were being translated into languages that had never before shared common meaning. We have learned together that our differences are not obstacles to overcome, but strengths to be celebrated and combined in service of our shared future. The new galactic government represented something unprecedented in known history as it combined the democratic ideals of human political development with the wisdom of ancient species like the Vorthok and the innovative technologies of civilizations that had been exploring space when Earth was still a single biome world. Every member species contributed according to their abilities while benefiting from the protection and opportunities that came with membership. Trade and cultural exchange flourished as former enemies became partners in exploring the mysteries of the universe and developing technologies that could benefit all intelligent life. The same diversity that the hegemony had viewed as weakness became the foundation for achievements that no single species could have accomplished. Alone military cooperation continued through the Defense Initiative, but the focus had shifted from preparing for war to preventing conflicts through strength that discouraged aggression while promoting peaceful resolution of disputes. The integrated fleets that patrolled galactic space served as both protectors and symbols of what could be achieved when different species chose cooperation over competition. Educational exchanges brought young beings from across the galaxy to learn not just technical skills, but the cultural understanding necessary for true cooperation between species that had evolved under different stars and developed completely different ways of thinking about fundamental questions. These programs ensured that future generations would be better prepared to face whatever challenges the universe might present. Research stations throughout Council space pursued scientific projects that combined human curiosity with alien expertise to push the boundaries of knowledge and technology in directions that no single species had imagined possible. Discoveries that might have taken centuries for individual civilizations to achieve were being made in decades through collaborative efforts that built on the strengths of every participant. The final scene of the Great Transformation took place at the Galactic Defense Academy, where cadets from dozens of species trained together using integrated tactics that emphasized both individual excellence and group coordination. Among them were young humans and former hegemony citizens working side by side to master skills that would protect the peace their predecessors had won through courage and sacrifice. Instructor Rachel Stone watched her students practice complex maneuvers that required perfect timing and absolute trust between beings who had grown up on different worlds under different stars, but who now shared a common commitment to defending the principles that made their cooperation possible. The galaxy had learned that diversity guided by shared values was stronger than uniformity enforced through fear. As Ships from 100 different worlds moved through space, carrying trade goods and cultural exchanges instead of weapons and conquest. The galaxy settled into a new golden age built on the hard-won understanding that true strength came not from the ability to destroy, but from the wisdom to create and protect, something worth preserving for future generations among the stars.